Hi, folks. Welcome to this week's lecture. Hope you had a great reading week and took some time to relax a bit. I know a lot of you were working on your final project, so it's good to see that you're sort of keeping up to things. Hopefully the second part of the semester has been a tad bit slower and easier for you. I know that, of course, you've got lots of demands on your time, and with this being a course that is kind of expected to take about 15 hours per week, I know that's a demanding workload from the department, but hopefully everybody's doing well and things are working out well, and that the assignments so far in the second half have been fine. I also think this is the first time we had Rachel teaching the last 2 weeks because of her expertise in qualitative methodology, and so it was great to have that, and you should have all your assignments back right now, I believe. So just as a bit of a status check-in, I hope things are going well, and that you feel fairly confident with where things are going. I think I feel like most people in the course look like they're on track to get pretty high scores. We may do a little bit of curving around the exam scores. They were not quite as high as I had hoped. I think maybe some of the questions ended up being a bit more tricky than I thought. People, can overthink things, and all sorts of things can go wrong. So we'll design the final to be a little bit more simpler, just to keep the grades in kind of the range that I think reflects what really looks to be an enormous amount of hard work. Okay, so with that kind of housekeeping stuff out of the way, we are going to talk about mixed method studies designs today. There's not a whole lot to this lecture, and in fact, the chapter itself is very short, and the lecture is going to, in many ways, just parallel what was there. So it gives you a kind of a brief overview of understanding. So the first questions we want to address is, what are mixed methods? And so mixed methods are really research designs that take quantitative and qualitative data and mix them. So this is not just collecting qualitative data, writing a paper, quantitative data, writing a paper, and then just treating them as kind of independent. You have to, in some way, do something to transform and mix and put these things together so that they are working together to actually have some value-added synergistic effect. So that's what we're looking for when we think of mixed methods. And you can think of a variety of reasons and scenarios in which that sort of mixing would create a better product overall. You can imagine that when you conduct an analysis and you find, a surprising finding, understanding the causal direction of that finding can often be very difficult. If you've got cross-sectional data, you find an association, it doesn't tell you which is causing which thing. Qualitative data can help you start to uncover some of that. And then perhaps you could design questionnaires better, justify doing a more robust study besides a cross-sectional study, and so on and so forth. And so this idea of mixing, another term for that we use is integration. And so I like this kind of definition of integration. It's when you combine it so that the data become interdependent in reaching a common theoretical or research goal, thereby producing findings that are greater than the sum of the parts. And so I think that's a really elegant definition for how we should think of mixed method studies, because they really do take upon and build upon the strengths, because there are certainly quantitative strengths and there are qualitative strengths, and we need both most of the time to answer our research questions. Now, when we use mixed methods, we're usually trying to do one of the following 5 things. There very well may be other reasons, but these are kind of the 5 common ones that the mixed methods literature tends to focus on. We can triangulate, and that's where you seek to kind of pull different sources together to try to prove. So maybe you're pulling a quant study and a qualitative study that both kind of say the same thing, and you're saying, look, these probably mean this. And so you have your answer. You can use them complementarily, and so you can seek to elaborate or enhance the results of one method using the results of another. So that's when maybe some gap. You've got a qualitative study, but qualitative study is not representative, and so you have a quantitative study that kind of says the same thing, and so they complement each other by filling in the gaps of the other. Then you can use one method to develop the other. And so this is often used, we'll start, for example, with qualitative interviews, find out what all the issues are, use those issues to develop a quantitative instrument and like a survey, and then administer that survey. Or you could do it kind of the other way around. We'll talk about a few of the designs in a moment. You could use kind of quantitative data to kind of generate some research questions, generate some issues, and you want to then design a qualitative interview series to answer or to build upon that. Then you can initiate, where that's where you're trying to really seek out new perspectives, trying to look at hidden causes, and look at maybe there's conflicting findings in a quantitative and qualitative study. So you want to kind of understand what are the basic causes here, so you can use it to initiate new research or new lines of inquiry. I think I described it in the textbook as. And then you can extend the breadth and range of inquiry. You can expand by seeing the broad constellation of things. So maybe you're doing a model and you want to explore how these factors relate to one another, and therefore broaden the number of factors that you might be interested in. And so that's all a bit abstract. And certainly any given study could very well have multiple of these purposes or multiple of these motives in conducting a mixed method study. Now, the 4 designs that we focus on in the textbook, the first of these is sequential explanatory designs. And so this is where you start a survey, and then you maybe use a survey to develop qualitative interviews, or you want to explain the survey results using qualitative interviews. That's what we call sequential explanatory design. Qualitative is used to explain quantitative results. So that's pretty simple. I think you can imagine that this is often needed because, as I said before, quantitative data doesn't always tell you how things relate together. They just tell you that there is a relationship. The next is sequential exploratory designs. And so we've basically just swapped the order. We've said, first we conduct these interviews, and then we're going to explore them further using quantitative survey. And so this is either we use it to develop a new survey, or we're taking data that already exists and we're saying, okay, based on those qualitative interviews, let's test this hypothesis, see if what they told us in the interviews pans out on kind of this larger scale. And so that's a useful study design as well. Then there's this concurrent triangulation design, which this is when you use kind of 2 studies conducted at the same time and you take their results and you mix them together to help you understand something. You notice with the concurrent designs, one study does not necessarily influence the design of the other study. And so that's a bit of a weakness, because it's nice to be able to have that freedom to make those sort of changes. But nevertheless, having both perspectives, especially if you've got a lot of reason, well thought out theoretical framing for why something might be a certain way, and you use that to develop your qualitative interviews and your surveys, then you use those results to say, look, we've kind of got those together. So that's kind of what we think of with triangulation as being applied to a research design. And then kind of finally, when you conduct a kind of a qualitative sub-study, this is called a concurrent nested design. And so this is often done where you'll ask a bunch of survey participants some questions using a questionnaire, and then you link that to qualitative responses. And so maybe your qualitative responses review things like family situation or life experiences, and then you look for themes in that, and you say, well, are certain people more likely to report certain themes and that sort of thing. And so this is a really easy way to make sure that the mixing happens in a mixed method study design, because the 2 data sources are so easy to connect, because you can connect participant level quantitative data to participant level quantitative data. Certainly in sequential designs, you could do something similar like this, where you have a quantitative study and then you develop, based on results of a quantitative study, a qualitative, using some of the same participants as your recruitment pool. So I think things start to border and get blurry. These are generally just broad categories. It is important to recognize that you can mix and match these designs as you want and as you need, because every study design is going to be a little bit different. And so you have to decide what is the perfect combination of qualitative and quantitative data to help me produce an evaluation or a research study that adequately addresses our primary research aims. And so don't get too stuck in these kind of four basic designs. While they are great, they're not everything, and you can certainly, as I said, mix and match. Um, so uh, when writing up the results, it's important to highlight why the quantitative component was delivered, why the qualitative component was delivered, and how you're going to do the mixing and why that mixing is necessary. And so as you start to integrate mixed method studies into your proposal, remember that it simply is not enough to just collect both types of data and say, oh, look, we've done a mixed method study. You want to be able to make sure that there is integration mixing happening and that it's clear why that was needed and what the value of that's going to show us, I think, the value of qualitative and quantitative mixed methods. And so making that argument specific to your evaluation and research questions is what we're hoping that you're able to do with your proposal. One thing that I find is incredibly helpful is to use diagrams to explain, how the relationship between things works. And so flowcharts and diagrams are a great visual resource, especially if they're designed aesthetically pleasing. I think I've never met an executive director who doesn't like a beautifully designed flowchart or diagram. So it's worth the skills to invest to be able to master kind of the development of those resources. And similarly, a well-designed Gantt chart can also be of incredible use to you. And so that's why one of the projects of this week, hopefully this assignment's a bit easier. I don't want you to super stress. Standard Gantt charts, like, don't go into so much detail. Talk about the general activities and outputs. You don't have to go into super specific detail about, and then we picked up a pen and we will use that pen on this day to fill out this form, that sort of thing. It's more of like, collect qualitative data. We'll do that in this month, this month, this month, or this week, this week, this week, and quarter. So however you do that. There are 4 videos that Natalie, from Natalie via Helen, that show you how to kind of use a project, a Gantt chart. These are generally applying to when you're just managing a project, right? But in this specific example, we want you both to show the implementation of the specific project and how your evaluation maps on top of that implementation to show us kind of the timing of events between what the organization and program is doing and what your evaluation is doing. You can see that this is kind of a fundamental important strategy to understanding how an evaluation will work. This goes a long ways in helping executive directors kind of understand, okay, what are they actually going to be doing as part of this evaluation? And so I find Gantt charts to be among the most important documents that you produce. And so in this week's assignment, basically you're going to create a Gantt chart for your program. It's important that your activities and outputs are included, that you have your evaluation activities, and that it's visually appealing, logically organized, easy to follow. Some of the videos here have some tips on how you can do that, so I can invite you to look at those. But one thing I wanted to add, based on some back and forth on the discussion boards, is that if you have a program that has some elements that are just not, they're completed, they're not being evaluated, you don't have to have a timeline that spans the entire life of the program. Now, some of your proposals are, we're starting a program and therefore it's from the beginning, but certain programs are like provincial programs that have been running for quite some time, and we don't need that big of a thing. It's fine to just say, we're evaluating these things because these are the things we can realistically evaluate, and therefore those are the things we're going to display in the Gantt chart. So that's perfectly fine. I know I've written all activities and outputs in the instructions, but just note that. So with that, that's the end of the lecture. I look forward to hearing from you on the discussion boards if you need any help.